All right. Welcome back, everyone, for the final part of our AZ-104 exam prep deep dive.
The home stretch.
It is. We've covered so much ground,
We have.
and now it's time to really get you ready for that monitor and maintain Azure resources section, which
Absolutely.
is a pretty meaty one.
It's a big one. It's probably the biggest section of the exam.
Yeah, and for good reason, right?
Yeah,
I mean, this is the heart of being an Azure administrator,
it
right?
is. Yeah. After you've built everything, you have to make sure that it continues to run.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
can't just set it and forget it, right?
Right.
So think about it this way. You spent all this time building out your Azure environment. You've got your virtual machines humming, your storage accounts all set up, your networks configured.
Hopefully they're configured correctly.
You got it, yeah. Hopefully you've been following along with our previous deep dives.
Yeah.
But how do you actually know that everything is running smoothly? How do you keep an eye on all of this stuff? You can't exactly just open up the window and peer into the cloud, right?
No, unfortunately not. We need a tool for that, and that's what we're going to be talking about today.
We need a whole bunch of tools, and that's what we're going to talk about, right?
Yeah.
And luckily, Microsoft gives us a whole suite of tools to do this.
We do.
And it all starts with Azure Monitor, which I feel like we've mentioned before, but we're really going to dive deep into it today.
Azure Monitor is like kind of the, if you're familiar with like on-prem monitoring tools, it's kind of like the System Center Operations Manager, SQM, of the cloud. It's that central location where you can go and you can see everything that's going on. You get all that information all in one place.
So it's like our central dashboard, our command center
Exact.
for understanding what's happening in our Azure environment.
Uh-huh.
And it's not just about seeing what's happening right now. It's about, collecting that data over time.
Yeah.
So we can spot trends, we can identify potential issues before they become major problems.
Exactly. Yeah. Proactive rather than reactive.
Proactive. Exactly. I love that. So Azure Monitor, it's collecting a lot of data. What kind of data are we talking about here?
So the two big ones are metrics and logs.
Right.
And I always like to tell people this because I always get them confused. But metrics are numbers and logs are words, pretty much. So if you think about it like that, if you want to see how your CPU is performing or how much memory is being used, you're going to look at metrics. And if you want to see what's actually happening, like what commands are being run or what users are logging in, you're going to look at logs.
Okay. So metrics, those are those numerical values. Think, like you said, CPU usage, memory usage, network traffic,
Yep.
disk I/O,
Yeah.
all that good stuff. And it's being collected, like every minute, every few seconds?
Yeah.
How often are we getting these metrics?
It depends on the metric, but yeah, it can be as often as every minute, every 30 seconds, every 5 minutes.
Okay. So we're getting a lot of data points here.
Yeah.
And then logs. These are those more detailed event records.
Yes.
So we're talking about things like, user login attempts,
Yep.
changes to resources, API calls, that kind of thing.
Exactly. If it happens, it's probably getting logged somewhere.
Okay. And this is important, right? Not just for understanding what's happening in our environment, but also for things like auditing
Absolutely.
and compliance, right?
Yep. You might need those logs in the future if something bad happens. Right?
Exactly. You want to be able to go back and see what happened, when it happened, who did it, all that good stuff.
Right.
So when it comes to the AZ-104 exam, knowing the difference between metrics and logs, that's huge.
It's huge, yeah. And being able to understand how to read them, how to find the information that you're looking for.
So be prepared for questions that ask you to, interpret a graph of metrics or analyze a log file to troubleshoot a problem.
Yeah. It's not enough to just know that they exist. You have to know how to use them.
Exactly. This is not just a theoretical exam. This is about, proving that you can actually work with these tools in the real world.
Right. They want to make sure that you're ready to go on day one.
Okay. So we're collecting all this data with Azure Monitor. We're looking at metrics. We're digging into logs. But do we have to be glued to the Azure portal 24/7 just waiting for something to go wrong?
I mean, you could, but you'd probably burn out pretty quickly.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I need my sleep.
Me too.
So there's got to be a better way, right?
There is, yeah.
And that's where Azure Alerts comes in, right? Our trusty sidekick for letting us know when something needs our attention.
Yeah, you got it. You don't want to be sitting there just watching the Azure portal all day, waiting for something to go wrong. You need something to tell you, hey, something's wrong, or hey, something might be wrong. You might want to take a look at this.
Right. So we can finally get some sleep, right?
Exactly.
Instead of, constantly refreshing the dashboards. So Azure Alerts, tell me a little bit more about how they work. Like what kind of things can we create alerts for?
Pretty much anything. Any metric, any log, you can create an alert for. So going back to our previous examples, if you wanted to know if your CPU usage went above, say, 80% for more than 5 minutes, you could create an alert for that.
Okay.
Or if you wanted to know if a certain event showed up in the event log, maybe somebody tried to log in and failed, you could create an alert for that too.
So we can be as general or as specific as we need to be.
Absolutely. And you can even do things like group alerts together so that you're not getting a million different notifications if a bunch of different things go wrong all at once. You can have them all grouped together into one incident.
That's handy. So I'm imagining like a situation where maybe one of our virtual machines goes down. We could have an alert set up that not only notifies us, but also maybe automatically tries to restart that VM.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we call an action group, right? So the alert will trigger, and then it'll kick off this action group, which can do all sorts of things.
Okay. And that's all configurable within Azure Monitor, right?
Exactly.
We're not talking about writing like custom scripts or anything like that.
No, no, no. This is all built in, drag and drop, pretty easy to use.
That's what we like to hear. So alerts, super important. I'm guessing we're going to see some exam questions about these.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You're going to need to know how to create alerts, how to configure them, how to use action groups. Definitely be prepared for that.
All right, so study up on those Azure alerts.
Yes, definitely.
All right, so we've talked about metrics, we've talked about logs, we've talked about alerts. What else is there?
So we've got a couple other tools. We've got Network Watcher, which is specifically for monitoring your network.
Okay.
And then we've got Application Insights, which is for monitoring your applications.
So Network Watcher, this is all about like understanding the flow of traffic in our Azure environment.
Exactly. You can use it to see things like what are the most chatty devices on your network? Where are you seeing the most latency? Are there any bottlenecks?
So if we're having like weird network connectivity issues, we can use Network Watcher to try and figure out what's going on.
Yep. It can even help you troubleshoot things like VPN connections.
Very cool. Okay. And then what about Application Insights? That sounds pretty self-explanatory, but tell me more.
So Application Insights is all about monitoring the performance of your applications. So whether you're running a web app, a mobile app, even a desktop app, you can use Application Insights to collect telemetry data about how that application is performing.
Telemetry data, so like how fast the app is responding,
Yeah.
if there are any errors being thrown, that kind of thing.
Exactly. You can see how many users are using your app, what features they're using, how long it's taking them to complete certain tasks. It's a really powerful tool for understanding how your applications are actually being used.
And I'm guessing, like all of the other tools we've talked about, we can create alerts based on this Application Insights data as well.
Absolutely. So if your app starts throwing a bunch of errors, you can get an alert about it right away.
Fantastic. So we can get those proactive notifications and fix those bugs before our users even know they exist.
Exactly. The dream.
I like the way you think. So Azure Monitor, it's a pretty big deal, right?
It's huge. I mean, it's really the foundation of your entire Azure monitoring strategy. Everything starts with Azure Monitor.
Okay. And we're not going to be able to cover every single feature of Azure Monitor in this deep dive.
Oh, no. I mean, we could do a whole series on this and still not cover everything.
Right. But we're trying to give you the highlights, the need-to-knows, especially when it comes to the AZ-104 exam.
Exactly. The goal is to make sure that you're ready to go and you can pass that exam.
Okay, so for our listeners who are studying for the AZ-104, what are some key takeaways that they should be focusing on when it comes to Azure Monitor?
So number one, make sure you understand the difference between metrics and logs. That's huge.
Metrics dot numbers, logs, words.
You got it. Number two, know how to create and configure Azure alerts. Those are your early warning systems, so you don't want to go into the exam without knowing how to use those.
And they're definitely going to ask you about alerts on the exam.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
What else?
Number three, be familiar with the different tools that are available within Azure Monitor, like Network Watcher and Application Insights. You don't need to know every single detail about how to use them, but you should at least know what they are and what they can do.
Okay. So understand the basics, but also be prepared to apply that knowledge in real-world scenarios.
Exactly. The exam is all about making sure you can actually use these tools, not just that you can memorize a bunch of facts about them.
Awesome. Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to digest when it comes to Azure Monitor.
Yeah, hopefully they're not too overwhelmed.
I hope not. It's a lot of information, but it's all good stuff.
It is. And it's all important if you want to be a successful Azure administrator.
All right, well, I'm feeling a lot more confident about my Azure monitoring skills now.
Good.
And I'm sure our listeners are too.
I hope so.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about some other resources.
Okay. That are available for people who are preparing for the AZ-104 exam.
All right.
All right, folks, buckle up. We're heading into the final stretch of our AZ-104 exam prep, and I'm feeling the heat.
Time to put all that Azure knowledge to the test.
Exactly. We've explored Azure Monitor like a couple of digital archaeologists, but now it's exam day, and those questions can feel like a jungle.
But the AZ-104, it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
They're going to throw you some curveballs. Test if you can really walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
So less about memorizing facts and more about what? Thinking on your feet.
Exactly. Imagine this. They hit you with a scenario, right? Virtual machines acting up. Slower than a... Well, you get the idea. The question asks, what Azure Monitor feature are you using to figure this out?
Okay, so not just what is Azure Monitor, but how are you using it?
Right. Are you jumping to metrics first? Digging into those logs? Maybe it's a network thing, so Network Watcher comes out, they want to see you think.
Okay, I see. So in that VM case, I'd probably check the metrics, right? See if there's a spike in CPU, memory.
Yeah.
Something's got to be off.
There you go. You're on the right track. And if those metrics look funky, then you dive deeper into the logs to see what's eating up all those resources.
Like a digital detective gathering clues.
Exactly. And that's what the exam wants to see, that you can connect those dots. But it's not just about knowing which CH tool.
Don't tell me. Got to know how to read the data, too. Those graphs, the log files. Intimidating.
Yeah, those can throw people off. My advice, don't panic. Look for the anomalies, the sudden spikes, the weird dips, anything that screams, this doesn't belong here.
Like finding that one out-of-place item at a crime scene.
Yes. And remember, those graphs, those logs, they're telling you a story. Let's say you're looking at network traffic to your app and bam, huge spike at 3 a.m.
Oh no, what happened?
Right. Could be malicious activity. Or maybe, just maybe, it's that new marketing campaign that just went live.
Context is key. Got to think like a detective and an Azure admin.
Exactly. Now, speaking of things you'll want to brush up on,
Please, give me the cheat sheet. What comes up a lot?
Azure alerts. Big time. They will ask you about those, know how to set them up, what thresholds to use, like notify me if CPU's above 80% for 15 minutes, that kind of thing.
Alerts, check. Anything else I should be cramming right now?
Log analytics, another biggie. KQL, that query language. That's your magic wand for making sense of those logs. Managing workspaces, too, and building those dashboards we talked about.
Okay, starting to see a pattern here. Log analytics is my new best friend.
It should be. It's powerful stuff. And while we're at it, don't forget about Network Watcher. They might ask you to choose the right tool for the job, like using IP Flow Verify or Connection Monitor.
Got it, Network Watcher. It's like having a direct line to the network gods. So much to remember.
Hey, you're doing great. Just remember, the best way to prep is to get your hands dirty. Set up a free Azure account, spin up some VMs, and go wild with those monitoring tools. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become exam day.
Practice makes perfect. And there are tons of resources out there, like Microsoft Learn, to help you along the way.
Absolutely. And remember, passing the AZ-104, it's just the beginning of your Azure adventure. The cloud's always changing, so keep learning, stay curious, and you'll go far.
Well said. And on that note, a huge thank you to everyone for joining us on this epic deep dive into Azure Monitor. We're so glad you came along for the ride. Best of luck on your AZ-104 exam. And remember, the future of the cloud is in your hands.
Keep those clouds monitored and happy deploying.